Margaret Hayes lived a quiet life in her two-bedroom cottage, surrounded by books and memories of her late husband. The loneliness had never bothered her until one October morning when she found herself staring at the empty chair across from her breakfast table. Without any plan, she grabbed her coat and keys and walked out the door, drawn by an inexplicable pull toward the city orphanage. She hadn't visited the orphanage in years, not since volunteering one Christmas. Inside, the rooms buzzed with activity children, laughing, babies crying, volunteers bustling about. Then she saw him, a baby boy sitting quietly in a bassinet near the window, his wide eyes staring at everything and nothing. He wore an oversized red hoodie, his dark skin beautiful and flawless, but what stopped Margaret cold were his piercing blue eyes, clear as glass. A tiny cloth bracelet wrapped around his wrist caught her attention, with two faded letters stitched into the fabric, Ka. When she asked about his name, the staff member shook her head. No name on record. Left here about 2 weeks ago. No one's come looking, probably another border case. The woman explained that he had no papers and the system was still figuring things out. When Margaret asked about adoption, she was told it would be complicated without proper documentation. Margaret stared at the quiet baby again. He wasn't crying, just watching. "I'll take him," she whispered. Months of navigating bureaucracy, court, filings, and special permissions followed, but Margaret never wavered. She named him Cairo, and when he finally came home, she held him against her chest and felt something fundamental shift inside her. Cairo grew rapidly, rarely crying and almost never getting sick. He showed signs of extraordinary intelligence before he could even walk. By age 2, he could mimic any sound perfectly. By 5, he had taught himself to read labels and maps. By 7, he was solving complex puzzles and fixing Margaret's broken appliances as if he had done it countless times before. But there was something more mysterious about Cairo. Sometimes he spoke in his sleep, not gibberish, but rhythmic, melodic. Syllables that sounded like an actual language. One night, he repeatedly whispered Kafaro Ama, Kafaro Ama. Margaret recorded it and played it for a local language professor, who said it resembled fragments of an old dialect from an African coastal tribe thought to be nearly extinct. When she asked Cairo about it, he simply said, "I don't know how. I know it, it's just in me." At 10, Cairo began asking deeper questions. Where did he come from? Why were his eyes different? What did his bracelet mean? Margaret told him everything she knew, which wasn't much, but promised that if he wanted to search for answers, she would help him. Instead of immediately searching, Cairo threw himself into studying. He devoured books on identity, cryptography, African political history, and computer science. By 17, he was building secure databases for nonprofit organizations, never letting go of that cloth bracelet he wore like armor. One winter, Cairo made a breakthrough. While scanning archived immigration files, a symbol on one document caught his attention, a seal almost invisibly embedded. On a page from 2002, it matched the symbol etched faintly onto the plastic bead of his bracelet. He dug deeper and discovered the seal belonged to an organization called the Kadura Initiative, which had been shut down after ties to a former political figure from West Africa were exposed. The country was called Ventara, and its leader, Kamari Ayatu, whose initials matched those on Cairo's bracelet, had been exiled after a failed coup. Cairo's breath caught as he ran facial recognition software on old government photos, uploading a childhood image of himself alongside one of Kamari Ayatu. The results showed a 92% genetic match. Kamari had disappeared without a trace 2 decades ago and was rumored dead. But before his fall, he had one infant son who was reportedly hidden during the chaos of the regime collapse. That infant was never found until now. That night at dinner, Margaret noticed Cairo's distance. When she asked if he was all right, he looked up and said, "I found something. Something big." He lifted his bracelet and added, "This isn't just a memory, it's a key." Cairo couldn't sleep that night. His mind raced with the implications: the bracelet, the seal, the genetic match to Kamari Ayatu. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth: his entire life was built on top of a secret. He wasn't just an orphan. He was the son of a man who once held power in a country torn by corruption and rebellion. Now, 20 years later, that history had come knocking. He thought about Margaret and how she looked at him with love, not legacy. She had never cared where he came from, but now he couldn't ignore it. He had to know everything. The next morning, with Margaret's blessing, he booked a consultation with an international records investigator. They flew to a secure archive in Geneva where the Kadura Initiative's remnants had been sealed after its collapse. The bracelet turned out to be more than a memento. Inside the central bead, hidden beneath the soft plastic, was an encrypted microchip. The tech expert smirked when Cairo asked if it could be cracked. Most of the world couldn't, but you wrote half the tools we're using. It took 2 hours to break the encryption. When the file opened, it revealed dozens of scanned birth certificates, personal logs, handwritten escape routes, coded letters, and one video. The video was old and grainy. Timestamp 2003. A man appeared on screen in a dark suit with sharp eyes and a fierce voice: Kamari Ayatu, holding a baby. "If this message is ever found, it means the initiative failed," he said. "They will say I was corrupt, a tyrant, but I was trying to save my country from vultures. This child, my son, will never know me, but he is my legacy." Cairo sat frozen as the implications sank in. The file contained proof of offshore humanitarian funds that Kamari had hidden away from both governments and warlords. Money intended to one day rebuild his nation in peace. The account access was tied to biometric DNA. His son's, Margaret, was the first person Cairo called. "I don't know what to do with this," he confessed. "It's too much." "You were never too much for me," Margaret said gently. "And if your father trusted that you were the key, maybe it's because he believed you'd do better than he did." Cairo stared at the glowing bracelet in his hand, realizing he had been chosen, not abandoned. Rather than chase power, Cairo quietly launched a global nonprofit under a new name, using the hidden humanitarian funds to build clean water systems, schools, and technology learning centers. He started in Ventara and then expanded across continents. Journalists speculated about the mystery donor, but his face was never published. Still, whispers of Project Cairo reached places even the Kadura Initiative couldn't. One afternoon, Cairo returned home to find Margaret sitting on the porch, sipping tea and smiling. "I saw a headline today," she said. "Anonymous benefactor rebuilds abandoned hospital in Cairo province." He chuckled. "I like that one." She leaned forward. "But you're still my boy, right?" Cairo's voice softened. "Always." He sat beside her, resting his head on her shoulder. The breeze rustled the trees, and somewhere down the block, children laughed as they chased each other. In that moment, the boy with the blue eyes, the one who used to whisper in his sleep and fix broken toasters, knew exactly who he was. Not just the son of a fallen leader, not just a name stitched into an old bracelet, but a man raised by love, shaped by truth, and trusted with a legacy meant to heal. Finally, after 20 years, he wasn't searching anymore. He was home. Later that year, Cairo was invited to speak anonymously at a UN-sponsored youth summit. They wanted to know how a single foundation had quietly impacted over 400,000 lives in less than 2 years. Cairo wore a plain gray suit and stood behind a frosted panel, unseen but heard. I was raised by someone who taught me that love doesn't need to ask where you come from to decide your worth, he said. I am here because someone saw me not as a mistake, but as a beginning. Applause echoed through the hall. Backstage, a UN official approached him. If you ever want to meet with Vantara's new government, they'd welcome you. You have influence, you could run for office even. Cairo shook his head with a gentle smile. That's not why I came back. I'm not a kingmaker, I'm a gardener. I'm here to plant something better. That night, he flew home to Margaret, who was knitting a sweater for the neighbor's baby. She looked up as he entered. You were amazing, she said, having watched the speech online. You watched? He asked, surprised. She nodded. Always. They sat together by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa as the world outside turned quiet. They needed nothing more, but in Cairo's heart, the fire that had once burned for answers now glowed for others who were searching. He vowed he would help him find the same thing he did, not just roots, but peace. Somewhere across the sea, a tree planted in his name blossoms every spring. Cairo smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest legacies are not the ones we inherit, but the ones we choose to create.